Welcome to the X Podcast, everybody. It's so good to be with my brothers.
Let's go.
How you doing,
man? How's it going? This is a normal time.
Nothing crazy happening today.
Just every day.
Yeah, so we're so excited to have you. If you're logging on our Facebook Live, or maybe you're listening to us on Spotify or iTunes, welcome. We just like to have these conversations about culture and society and spirituality and how we can grow and lead better lives. So if you could, we would love if you would email us at podcast@thex.church. We would love to just get some questions, some feedback. We've had so many emails. We just are so thankful for all of you who are dialoguing with us. We just love to have community with you. And then as well, we'd love for you to like and subscribe to our podcast, share if you're watching this on Facebook, just to get as many people on here as we can. We just, our goal is just to have some helpful conversation. But I just wanted to lead off today by saying I am so tired. I am so tired.
Why are you tired?
Why?
This is my 12th cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I'm so tired. Depending on
Why
when
were you up late last night or something? Did you not go to bed last night?
Depending on when you're listening to this, we had just a little bit of a federal election going on last night, and it's not done. It's still going. We are still counting the votes.
As
Pastor
we record
Tim,
this, it's November 4th.
Pastor Tim,
right?
Who did you vote for?
Oh, that's a great question, isn't it? Here's what I know. This is what I really feel. Regardless of who I voted for, as we heard from someone else say, I voted for the wrong person.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of who I voted for, I voted for the wrong person.
Yeah, I feel like I'll be disappointed whoever wins.
Pastor Russ,
yes.
who did you not vote for?
I did not vote for Howard Green. Was that one of the people on? But I think this is fascinating to point out, and that's what makes these conversations fun, is not to make you nervous, but I will say this. I'm going to say who you voted for. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
But I will say,
You don't know.
we voted for different people at this table.
Sure.
Yep.
All kinds. In fact, I was so excited to support my Libertarian Party. I'm just kidding. Sorry. Although there are a lot of things I agree with the Libertarian Party. So I'm just going to say that, and that's how far I'm going to go with that.
We had to make the decision that we're not going to let you get in trouble on this podcast.
What are you talking about?
I do want to get myself in trouble. I want to say something.
We're not going to
bad.
talk about politics for the whole time today, are we?
Listen,
we'll do that later.
Listen.
People are on edge.
People are very much on
This
edge.
one feels different.
It feels very different. Listen, even me. I went to college for like a year and a half, which is, great education. But
Harvard.
I broke the record at my school for the most majors in the shortest amount of time in school. So one of my majors was political science, and I'm a geek about this stuff, man. I love it.
You are a geek.
That's why I was
He
absolutely.
knows
I love
every
watching.
single host of every show on CNN and Fox News.
everything.
He
I
knows
have
about
opinion.
every single one of them, the
my
commentators and the actual.
I love it. It's pageantry, and everybody gets so angry and offended at everything, but I just think it's so fun.
So
to
let me just
watch.
say
It's
this,
engaging.
that the three of us, we all got together last night to watch and have an election
Pastor
watch
Zach
party.
and
Pastor Zach was
Rebecca.
there, Rebecca, they hosted it, and just to hang out. And it was fun. You were like a freaking kid at Christmas. I said, here's the best way I can describe it. It would be like a kid
It's better than Christmas.
He's watching. It's like a
better than
kid
Christmas.
who's watching a monitor of all the places that Santa Claus is delivering gifts as he's getting closer to his house. That's what it was like. And I just was there for
I
the
love
company.
people
It was
talking
fun.
about
Was Pastor
things.
Zach enjoying it as much?
He was a puddle. He was in turmoil. We had to pick him up off the floor a bit. Like it's like 1 second he was
Literally,
happy, 1 second he was
off the
crying,
floor.
and it was just, oh my gosh, that guy, he really
I love
internalized
though.
it. It was a lot of fun.
I love watching people act like they know what they're talking about when nobody knows what's going to happen.
Nobody. What's your guess, though? I want to know. What's going to happen?
I honestly, I went to bed last night and woke up this morning. I thought Trump's winning. Now, before that all happened, I actually thought, before even going into today, I thought Biden was going to win for certain reasons.
It's
I'm not
so
saying I
weird,
wanted
though.
Biden or Trump. I'm just saying I expected
you
Biden
wanted?
to win.
Was that a
I thought I
Freudian slip?
expected, no.
Who did you want?
I thought I expected Biden.
Okay.
And
So that's who you
then,
wanted.
and then into
Yeah.
the
So that's who
and
you wanted.
into it, I actually
Or you
thought
didn't
Trump
want-
was going to win.
wait,
When
Can we
I heard you
stop?
praying for Joe
What do you
this
want?
morning, was that?
Jorgensen?
Joe Jorgensen, thank you.
I thought you said something
Yes,
about
it
a
was Joe.
Hayden, but it may have been a.
Yeah.
When he was getting out of his car last night, I heard Kanye though
Yes.
bumping.
I may have written Kanye's name in. I heard he was going to
He's
give a
on
pair of
the
Yeezys
birthday
to
party.
every single U.S. citizen. So I got super
No
excited.
one- none of
I
us-
might have written his
listen.
name in.
Yeah, but here's
What's your guess?
Honestly, I thought this morning
But
that
here's
Trump
the
was going to
thing.
win.
No
and
one
now things
knows.
have changed already
Last
again.
night
so
they're
I have
talking
no
about,
idea.
listen, it's going to lean Biden because early votes are being counted first and election day votes are counted later. And now this morning they're saying just be patient. Early votes are counted last. I
CNN
just
kept saying,
think-
"Look, here's the popular vote, but that's not how we choose a president."
Yeah,
right?
CNN saying- You know what's the
Here's
funniest
the
part? Can I say
menu
this?
for this
Here was the
candidate.
funniest
Here's
part.
the buffet for this candidate.
I thought
It's like
the-
no one
The
knows.
best part was we switched back and forth, so we were on CNN for a while, and hearing them all talk and use a personal pronoun, right? To be
We
like
kept slipping
we.
in.
So it's like, and they kept talking about Joe Biden as we, like they were part of his entourage. And then we flipped over to Fox, and they did the exact same thing with Trump. They were like, "Well, I think this, I think we're going to be in for a long ride. Like if we keep going in this direction." I was like,
Yeah.
"Wait a minute,
I'll
who's
tell you-
we?" And I was
And then
like,
we flipped
"Oh,
over to your personal favorite, MSNBC.
MSNBC.
And then they were.
we never watched MSNBC."
Breitbart.
I said, "Let's go to
Listen,
NBC," and we didn't.
I was most disappointed last night in Joe Rogan's election coverage.
Really?
Really?
Did you see that?
No.
No.
It was live. and
That was all Nate
It was
Silver.
not as entertaining as it usually is.
I would have watched that though.
Anyway.
Was he concerned?
Listen, we're not going to talk about that all day today.
I think we should, though. We will. So let's just put this out there in a future podcast when we want to come back, when everybody is like all the sore losers and all the people that are glowed, everybody, like we just come back to some reality and go, okay, life is going to go on.
Hey.
And it's like my world hasn't just changed, or my world's not ending, or the world's not going to get way better tomorrow or in January. I think it would be great to be able to come back and
Yeah.
just a dialogue about the process, about the election, maybe about the candidates, about what we saw,
Yeah.
about how we felt about things. We
Yeah.
we didn't want to sway anybody, and
I
that's
think
just
that
not
would be
for
great.
us to do.
And
but-
hey, since this is live, I don't think this will happen. But if they announce who the winner is during this, maybe one of our people helping us with this podcast can let us know, and we can announce.
I don't think it's going
it.
to happen.
You don't think so?
I don't think it's going to happen in the next hour or two or three.
What do you know that we don't know?
Yeah. Who told you?
Well, I was talking to President Trump, and he told me that he's
Listen.
actually signed an executive order to stop counting.
Moving on. Here's what we talked about today. Here's what we, I think, can all relate to as I get us back on track is that whether you're a Republican, Democrat, whatever
Or
you
Christian.
are, or the birthday party, whatever
Or
you
Christian.
Or Christian. Sorry,
are, or
we put in
Christian,
a third
there we
party.
go. That was good.
Sorry.
Whatever you are, whatever you identify with as far as party, the past, what is it? Since we've shut down on the lockdown,
March 12th.
9 months, 9 months. The past 8-9
Almost.
months have been the most unique, probably the most unique season of life that anybody on this planet has lived through. I remember being in the grocery store in April, okay, and it was when we didn't know if we were going to be able to go to the grocery store.
Were
for
you
a
looking
lot
for toilet
longer or
paper?
not. No, I can't remember. But I remember talking to. This was the most eerie thing that happened. That has probably happened since we've locked down. And there was like this 85-year-old guy at the grocery store, and you could sense this level of fear and anxiety in him. It's like you don't expect that from somebody who's been around the block a couple times. It's like you've been through this, you were born during that, and world wars and whatever, and Vietnam and Korea, but you are just as unsure and anxious about the season we're in as I am.
As a 16-year-old?
I'm losing my breath right now, and what we can all realize is that there has been, just in general, as we've been battling a pandemic of, COVID-19 and the racial injustice, racial tensions that we are experiencing right now in the past couple months, there's also been this other pandemic building, and that's one of mental health, anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
some could argue that it's been building before this season. We even did at this church a whole sermon series on it. Pastor Tim, you did it so masterfully, but we had counselors in and we talked through anxiety and depression from a spiritual perspective, because we noticed that it was a problem, especially in our young people. But now we've gone through 9 months of just tension, anxiety, and people who've never struggled with these feelings before are having to come to terms with these new realities that we live in. And we're in this really contentious election, and people are losing friendships, and families are splitting up, and it's wild. So I just want to know, like, for you guys, I think both of you are pretty healthy in your mindsets and your structures and the way you live, in order to keep in healthy headspaces. But when did you start realizing maybe that the anxiety level in the country and the world was starting to rise?
Russell?
Yeah, where do you start? I think there's the baseline before pandemic, right? So like you said, mental health, and that's been even identified and defined as a pandemic way before 2020 hits. Then you have 2020, which isn't just one pandemic. It is multiple pandemics in the course of 1 year. I mean, it's been joked about. It's like a movie. The injustice, even the things we joke about, killer bees and Saharan winds. And we started this year with an assassination on an Iranian general.
Yeah.
And we've forgotten about that because of all the craziness of the year. And then I think, so for me on a personal level, March.
And Kobe Bryant.
And
Kobe
Kobe
Bryant.
Bryant, all the people that have passed away, celebrities, athletes, Christian leaders even. This has been a year where even if everybody was at a really healthy emotional, mental baseline, there has not been enough space to process all the different pandemics that have happened globally, nationally, and personally.
Yep.
So walking with people and walking in our own lives through our own things. We have our own internal worlds. So we all have things we're processing. I know me personally, there's things in 2020 I've processed. Then you add on to that the isolation,
Yeah.
the tension,
Oh, absolutely.
the fear, the anxiety. It honestly has been more than I think anybody has known this year to process. And it's something I think years and even decades down the road, therapists, counselors, pastors are going to be dealing with. I think depending on our personalities, again, our level of emotion, our level of, I think there's people this year that have caved, and we know this. We know suicide attempts have been through the roof. Anxiety, depression has been through the roof. Divorce rates are going through the roof. I talked to pastors who, in their church alone, healthy marriages, 4 or 5 just in the first few months split.
Yeah.
Child abuse.
We've seen that.
Child abuse.
Domestic abuse.
Yeah.
I think too, I think is going to be impacted the most by this. I just really, really feel, I think it's going to be a whole nother level of crisis. I think it's going to be the young generation, and all of us are going through it. But I just think about, to go through something like this and the way it impacts your life. And I just don't think we're going to know or see the effects of this for years to come, of how it's going to come out.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing it now. We see it. I mean, young people right now are more anxious than ever before. This youngest generation is more anxious than previous generations through studies and everything.
And I think what you're saying is, and that's even pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, it was already on the rise. This last decade has been the worst
What's
decade.
being highlighted through things like the social dilemma,
and
through the things we're finding out from the level of disconnection and the things that come with social media.
Hospitalizations are through the roof.
And then you add this
for suicide
year.
attempts.
Yeah.
Suicide attempts are through the roof. I don't think, personally, I think when you look at the last 20 years, that has been the perfect setup for mass levels of anxiety in the younger generation, whether it's just growing up in an environment where, just seeing too many school shootings. And even if you don't see them, schools practice drills on them now. So what does that do? It strikes fear
when you're
into people.
When you're in kindergarten, you're throwing desks up against your door, and
so
the administrators have to prepare for this with children. It's crazy.
So there's a lot. Wild. There's a lot for that to handle that I don't think we quite know as a society how it's going to bear out.
The memory and trauma going to school with masks.
Isolating, not being around grandparents. You got that, and then you put on top of all of that. I don't think this is a coincidence, but studies have shown that the huge increase in anxiety in young generation, I think over this last decade, has ramped up way faster. And I don't think there's a coincidence that has been the onset of social media. I think when you put all of those factors together, and then you add this pandemic on top, it's like the cherry on top of the whole, where we've been going for the last 10 years. I think we're going to be dealing with the effects of this for a really long time.
So neither of you answered my question.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask again. When did you start feeling the effects personally of the heightened levels of anxiety? Like,
when did you start crying?
Okay,
when did the hairs?
When
did the hair? No, I'm just kidding. You guys. I mean, I agree with everything you said.
Would you say that I answered it perfectly?
Right. It was
just not
perfect.
personally.
I want to know when you started to sense it. Because I have a moment in my head where the hairs on my neck begin to just rise. I'm like, this is something's happening here. So I just wonder if you can think of a time. Or is it recent? Is it months ago?
Like when I personally sensed this year rising, or for me as
You personally,
I'm walking through,
not
okay.
just like an analyst looking at the country, but
Right.
personally
How
going.
yeah. I think it's so interesting. I still remember the Wednesday you had just come in from vacation. Mm-hmm. You said, "Hey, we got to shut this thing down for at least a week or two."
Yeah.
That was the language for
Yeah.
a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's what we thought.
So that turns into the new norm of working remote. Mm-hmm. And I tend to be a person, fight or flight. I go into fight pretty quick. Mm-hmm. I'll spring into action and run towards the problem fast and hard, which can be good and bad. And what was interesting about this year, at least for me personally, was every month felt like 5 different lifetimes. So it sounds like a cop-out, but part of it, even when I think back to try to process, is there were weeks that felt so good and healthy. Mm-hmm. Like my personality, I immediately sprang into action like, oh, these are the things I'm going to accomplish. I've got to run towards the goal. I've got to make sure I do this, and this. So there was weeks that were healthy, but then I think I noticed there were weeks where I was like, oh, wow, I'm not okay. And I think around mid-April. So March to April was, oh, here's what has to be done.
Yeah.
So it sprang into action. But I think you get into April and May, and I think one of the benefits is I felt like as a society we started giving ourselves permission to, oh, how am I feeling? How am I doing? Mm-hmm. And I think April and May specifically for me were pretty tough. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I live alone. Mm-hmm. My parents are halfway across the country. They're older. Hadn't seen them in about a year. Yeah. I have that concern. Mm-hmm. And then my personality type, I love the city. So where most people will come home to retreat to family at night,
Yeah.
I'd have a few nights a week where I'm enjoying urban delights of a city and the creature comforts of going to a coffee shop and going out and enjoying the city. So I think for me, I could give a really long answer to this. But I realized really quickly, oh, wow, I'm going to have to be very careful about my rhythms, my disciplines, and what do I do once I stop work for the day? What do I do? And I think for me is around April and May also that it's hard for me sometimes to give myself permission to feel. Sometimes I'll be talking to Kevin and he'll ask me a question. I'll start answering. He's like, okay, you don't have to preface it with that. But part of me feels like, look, I don't have a right to complain. There are people during this that have been dying.
Yeah.
Or losing their jobs or their families dying. I have it good. I'm fortunate. But then it's that point where at some point I have to internally give myself permission. Like, what am I actually feeling? And I think it's around April or May that I'm just like, wait, we all, no matter whether we have it good or not, there is a deep sense of grieving and loss. A loss of societal norms, a loss of isolation, a loss of, even for us, church, we couldn't gather physically and corporately, a loss of, I don't know what the future holds, a loss of momentum of whatever felt like there was progress. And so around April and May, I think I gave myself permission to feel that, process that, recatalyze, okay, what are my rhythms going to look like? But I was telling Kevin, and then I'll shut up because I could process this forever, but I think it was after quarantine ended that I felt like, this sounds melodramatic, that any sense of PTSD, I was like, oh, wow, my adrenaline of making it through quarantine was so intense that whereas I feel like some people, their deepest moments of darkness were during quarantine, I feel like mine were after. Mm-hmm. Mine were when things on paper I should be celebrating. Mm-hmm. I was like, why do I feel so off emotionally. There were weeks where I'm like, this does not make sense. Like quarantine for us in our context, Midwest, is over.
When you say off, can you?
Oh man, like there were things in my life besides quarantining. There were things in my life that were very celebratory. Things going super well in job and church and but I would feel low grade levels of dread that I couldn't put my finger on. Low grade levels of loneliness, low grade levels of emotions that as much as I like to feel like I'm introspective, I didn't even know how to name or put my finger off. And this is really vulnerable, but I had weeks where I would tell just some of my friends, man, I can't even explain what I'm feeling. And this actually should be the happiest month of my life on paper for this year.
Right.
And so many great things in life are happening, but emotionally, I just can't name where I'm at other than it's off.
It's good.
Good.
Yeah, I think you were telling us.
Should I pay you?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna
I'll
lay down
bill
on
you
the couch.
later. I think you should tell the people, though. We first noticed that something was going on with you in a real bad way. I'm just kidding. We were all talking about this podcast and he's like, "Yeah, yesterday I just went to." I'm starting to talk with a Southern accent. I'm not making fun of you.
I won't
I
tell
just think
you
it's
that.
funny. He's like, "Yesterday I went to Hocking Hills and."
I sat on
I
a rock.
sat on a rock and I grieved, man. I was
2
just
hours.
grieving.
Okay. Okay.
That
So
wasn't
thanks
supposed to
for
bring that
sharing
up.
your
That was a
feelings with
private
us.
moment. Why did you bring that up? I wasn't going to bring that up.
Well, now that I'm Clint Eastwood. Okay, so I didn't know if we were going to
we
say
don't have
this.
to go into that.
Well,
you need to hold that.
Hold that for
that's a
the-
special
the-
moment.
Listen, I was
I'd
just
hold
trying
that.
to.
no, I can
No.
Thank you for
stop.
sharing, though. I think it's real, and I think that I don't know. I think a lot of people can associate with what you're.
Well, and I can go there for a second. I know we're going to talk at the
Yeah,
end of the year
let's-
about this, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was just like, man, like as much as I love the city, it's like I'm going to go to Hocking Hills and just get out in nature. I love Hocking Hills in the fall; it's beautiful. And but I did. I was like, you know what? Like, I love to journal. My analytical mind, I love to make lists. I love to process. But I also just had a weekend where I'm like, oh man, like I can't shake whatever I'm internalizing and processing and working through. So I was like, I need to have just a raw, like, just talk with God. Like, I need to. And so, I told him in a way that, it sounds really funny, and we'll lose some people on this. But I hiked through Hocking Hills, but I took my phone, put on airplane mode. But I spent a few hours just sitting and thinking.
Yeah.
And I made 3 lists. I made a list of the global things that happened in 2020 in case I looked back in 10 years and didn't believe myself. I mean, everything from the pandemic to the social unrest to who died to killer, murder, assassination hornets or whatever they are, to sub-Saharan, to aliens invading Toronto, everything. And then I made a list of the things to celebrate. Like, here are the awesome things that happened. Here are the new hobbies, the new projects I worked on here, like the accomplishments. Here's all the wins. Here's the answered prayers. But then I made a list of, just to let myself feel it. And I made a list of
Your feelings.
And here's what could you say it differently than that? It was a feelings diary.
It's great. I think that's great.
I made a list.
We're gonna
of,
do it.
Here are the things I'm grieving.
You guys do need to do.
We
a
need to
feelings
do it.
diary.
Well, and here's the thing, because psychologists
You
say
only
this.
have one thing on your paper:
Hey,
anger.
Even good change.
Shut
Even good change has a psychological and emotional impact
Yeah.
on you. Even good
Moving
change
to a
is
new
loss.
house is still
Everything like that.
Yeah.
And so I just made a list of here are the things I'm grieving. Here are the things that I've had loss of. Here are the things I'm trying to put words to. And then I just gave myself permission
It's good.
to talk to God about it and to grieve.
No, I think it's good. And I think it's helpful. We're like you said, we're going to talk about that
Let's talk about that later.
more later,
More in depth.
We got
We'll
a
get you on the
special
couch.
little-
We'll get you on the couch
on the
later for
couch.
this.
Hey,
We
can
have
you-
something special lined up for our
Can someone
church.
fix me?
But I want to talk about your feelings, boss.
Yeah, I'm good.
Tell us about your feelings. I want to
What
know
do you
about
mean?
your deepest, darkest secrets. Have you cried in the past 6 months? Just kidding. But how-
Sure.
how have you processed it? When did you realize, something's changing here? There's some anxiety in the air, not just when you noticed it in the world, but when you felt it.
Well, why are you pointing at me? My gosh, you're so angry.
What all
I found
rocks
out
have
about
you
eight-
wept on?
Yeah, let me talk about the rocks I wept on. That's good. Well, for me, it was, I remember specifically, it was March 16th, 2021. That was the moment when I felt all of this.
You haven't felt anything yet.
So that's yes, I joke, but I think for me, we're a little bit wired the same and share the same Enneagram number, so we probably kind of approach the same thing. I go into problem solving mode. That's just my default. It's like if something's wrong in the world and I know I can't solve the world's issues, I'm going to solve the issues that are in front of me.
Right.
So I'm going to solve, we like church, we're still going to have church, but we can't meet in person.
Right.
So how are we going to do online? And I
Right.
threw myself into that. And it's like, okay, how are we going to connect with people? And so let's start a daily social media PT15 and let's try to encourage people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just think I go into that mode. Mm-hmm. So it was a work mode,
Mm-hmm.
Which again, is probably a little bit of a mechanism for me to go, I don't want to feel it, you know, disassociate. Like, let's just go to work. But I saw a problem that needed to be solved. That's the first way I think it's just the way I view the world.
Yeah.
I view the world, I see a problem first. My first thing is to solve it, which means that I don't really process it until after. So I just, I am a little bit, but I'll be honest with you, I probably will not really even process all of this until more so on the other side of it. I'm trying to get myself on a rock with you. I might need to go with you.
I'll take you.
Take
I'll
me
be
with me,
on the
and
other side of the trees.
I might
Dwight.
need that, but I find myself like, you know, I think I just throw myself in to be so busy. But I think it was just, this was a very, very weird season for me in the role that I'm in, where I feel the weight. So I will say this, rather than feeling anxious, and at times I absolutely did feel anxious. I felt anxious for a variety of reasons. I didn't feel anxious as much about the actual virus, but what it would do cause the world, my world, that it would change. The ministry direction, I think, you know, as an achiever, it affects where we're going, and achievements are now interrupted by it. That's the kind of thing. And so for me to like, we're pandemic, it's shut down. We've got to still somehow be a church. I want to still have, you know, and then in the middle of a building project, like for me to be like, it was that was a big one. Like in the middle of a building project that did not slow down. And wanting to open up a new facility, and literally when all this happened, and it's like, why, God? Why would you, of all, it's been rough for 2 years now, 3 years, and now this? It just felt like for me, it's been one of those seasons. It's like, expect the unexpected. Big Brother. Like, you know, that's their slogan. It literally, that TV show, it literally felt like expect the unexpected. It just couldn't get worse than this, right? Yeah. And then I think the height of where I felt the most stress was probably more into the summer. I feel like it was June, July. Yeah. That's where I began to feel a little bit, you know, the most, because I think I was so work mode. I think, you know, I felt like we accomplished something with our online broadcast that was like, you know, so I think for me, I can find wins in all of that. And so that gives me a sense of normalcy. It's like, we did that, and that was really good. We did that. But I think when you had when things erupted with the George Floyd and the racial injustice, and then to see the way that whole thing really kind of created more division than bringing our country together. The way it was seen, the way it became politicized,
the way we cared as a church,
the way we cared, the fallout, and then by June, end of May, June. That's why I feel like it culminated there. It wasn't just that. But that's when you started to really see a certain groups of people come up, and it's like try to call the church out for you're not being faithful, for not meeting. And you know what I mean? You're caving to some place. It's like, wait a minute, aren't we just trying to like follow like the epidemiologists? Like, aren't they the experts we're supposed to listen to? What are we supposed to do for mankind and pandemic? And You might believe something completely different. Who knows what I know everybody's a scientist and everybody's got to figure it out. We don't. I'm just trying to be a pastor. I have a church and we're trying to follow our local leaders. And I feel like when that all bubbled to the surface where people are mad and it's like people leave the church because, because you won't open back up. And if you did open back up, people will leave the church because you're rude and insensitive, don't care about the people around me.
Right.
Like, it was just, I think for me, it kind of just reached that point where it's like, I just want this to all go away.
Was there an anger?
Oh, yeah. I would say there's an anger. There was an anger. I think there was and it wasn't directed at any one person, but there was an anger at, like, I don't know. I mean, anger is a strong word because it's hard when you don't have an object to be angry at, but I was, just, it wasn't anger at God. It was just the whole situation.
Was it
anger?
More of a low-grade level of frustration than anxiety?
Yes. I have not gotten to the point where it was like that panic attack anxiety, and I've felt those before, had those before. It wasn't like that. But I also recognize something about myself 5 years ago when I did a sabbatical, the first one ever, and it was not good. I did not enjoy it at all, the extended kind of sabbatical. But there was, and some of it has to do with my seat and the role that I have with this church and other things, and probably the way I see myself and how I have to carry things. I feel like I operate in a pressurized environment and I operate under pressure 24/7. I don't think I remember when I went on sabbatical and it was like 3 or 4 weeks where you're disconnected from the church, from the requirements, from the having to preach every weekend, from all these things that I started to feel. Feel emotions and feel like, and I did not like it. They were not good. It was so scary. I did not like it. And so I think it's kind of like if you have wounds, and this is why I think I'll process this more on the backside. But if you have wounds from this stuff, it's like you put something on, you put pressure on the wound, it's not bleeding.
Yep.
Right? But if you don't fix it, you let go of the pressure, it starts bleeding. Again, I think that's for me because I live in such a pressurized environment. So
Yeah, I want to say just.
here it comes.
I know.
He is our local psychologist.
I'm going to play the role of shrink today.
Oh, gosh.
So if you would allow me. But I will say you guys are very similar. And thank God for people in our lives that are like you two during a pandemic, during crisis, who, oh my gosh, the world's falling apart. And you guys just, man, from my perspective, you guys were just work. I mean, writing stuff. I mean, we got this kind of like database management thing that we all work on here at the church. And you guys just posted, bling, bling, my phone's going off, just wild at all hours of the day, 8:30 p.m. on a Sunday. I mean, Saturdays, whatever. Just texts and things being planned. And thank God for people like you guys, And I think what's cool about these conversations is that we all process this crap differently.
Yeah.
This is wild. Like you got older kids, you don't have kids. I got young kids. All right, there's all sorts of different spaces we come in. Some of you have school-age kids. I mean, there's just so much nuance. Some of you are like yourself, and you're leading organizations, and you're leading businesses. Here's the other thing that we're all kind of in charge of people spiritually, and we bear that weight. And I resonated with so much of what you said about when the George Floyd stuff happened, and all of a sudden we started to maybe see our country come together over this shared suffering we're all going through. And then we are all everybody turn on each other.
Yeah.
And so from our perspective, and I'm sure we're not the only ones that felt this way.
Yeah.
But we had people leave the church because we
talk about it too much.
Talk about it too much.
Didn't talk enough about it.
Didn't talk enough. We were called everything that people were calling each other, people called us and would meet with us and say, I have to leave because you guys, and it's like, and that's a hard place.
With what's already going on in the world.
Yeah.
Well, I think the
That's a hard place
pandemic
to be.
also already created an environment because I think it exposed for many Christ followers. I think it exposed a lot of things that it was like the church. I love the church and coming together church, but I really feel like it, and it showed me something as a pastor and a leader that it was just like that there's, I'm trying to say this as nice as I can, but it felt like there's still a whole lot of babies that need the bottle every Sunday.
It was
and that sounds, it was a very exposing thing.
That's
and
what
for me
happens,
as a
though.
leader, I expose and goes, okay, so
exposes
people,
people's
I just think
mindsets.
if you lost your faith because we were not able to connect in person, for 2 months, 3 months at the time, that it was just that I feel like that all led up
Here's
to
the problem.
this, and I think it's like,
But here's my deal is that we all went into survival mode.
yeah,
As a world, as a country, like
Yeah.
we turned on. If you're trying to make a living for your family,
Yep.
or you're trying to pay all your employees, or you're trying to get government money and apply for this stimulus and get that, and like I moved on April 17th. I moved, which was a month after everything. So, everything switched for us as a family. I mean, there's so many different nuances. What I was going to say about you is that you have a whole nother responsibility. Not only do you pastor people, but you employ people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or you're in charge of people's employment. However you want to look at that, with the church. But everybody's struggling with different things. I think for me, I saw how you guys responded to. I responded very differently. We started working remotely, and I had 2 kids under the age of 3 or 4 or whatever at the time that were running around while I'm working. Okay. My job at the time, or just my role that I was playing at the church, obviously we pastor people, but had a lot to do with our in-person gatherings and preparing spaces and events and things like that. And when you take away, my job was pretty much, let's check in with people here and there, but really as far as the operation of it was halted, just like so many people. So you have some people on our staff who are busier than ever.
Yeah.
People who create content. You're teaching, preaching, trying to get the message out. We have the creative team that's sprinting. Man, they're working Saturdays. They're working just worked so much, and they had to, and thank God they did. But there's a whole other part of the staff. I don't know if you can resonate with this if you're listening, but there's, parts of your team that are working and parts of your team that's like, I don't know where I fit and what. And I think that when it comes to the way we processed it and our feelings, it's very similar. We have people who are like, go, 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 go. And we have people who are like, this hurts really bad.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think the anxiety came first when we were all going to buy toilet paper. That the Wednesday we shut down, I think it was that night. I'm like, Andrew, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy as many groceries as we can because this might get really bad.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us had that anxiety in the beginning, just generally. And I'm not somebody who's ever really struggled with that kind of stuff, but for the first time in my life, I felt real depression. I've just recently been able to define it and put language to it. I think it started that night that all those riots broke out with George Floyd and all that. That was, I don't know if it was grief or just a deep sadness for our country and for the way that certain people were hurting.
Yeah.
You feel like you're blindsided by, wow, I can't believe I've been so ignorant to certain things.
Yeah.
So a deep grief, I think. And then you start hurting with people who are hurting, and people in our church are hurting, and people are leaving, and there's no end in sight to all this stuff. And man, I just, I think in my life, I probably am someone who could use some more discipline. And so the lack of discipline as far as my consistency, waking up and whatever, it's just all exposed when you, when you're surviving. And so me and my wife worked opposite shifts, and there's just so much going on, man, that, she's had some stuff that she's, we're pregnant with our 3rd baby, which is awesome. Right now. But as there's some stuff that when we found out she was pregnant, I think that also adds to the emotional bonfire that's going on right now in the country. So just a really interesting season.
Well, I think, what the whole point of kind of even our conversation today is just we're staring down a double-barrel shotgun called anxiety. Like it is a whole other, as you say, pandemic crisis. Like there's all these crises that we're dealing with. The virus is a crisis, the social injustice, and the riots and the protests and all of that stuff is, part of it. The whole election is, just it feels like it's one thing after another. And then the isolation is a crisis, like the economic, like it feels like it's crisis after crisis after crisis this year. It's all mounting up and it's building up. And I don't know how, like I said, for all of us, I think that's an interesting point. It spills over in a different way in a different time. And but it is going to at some point spill over even more. I think that's what we saw with the George Floyd and then all of the protests and riots. I feel like that was a little bit of a spilling over of even there, but I just think there's even a bigger one of anxiety, real mental health challenges, problems that, like you said earlier, we're going to be dealing with, I think, for years.
Yeah.
And this, I just wonder how the generation growing up with this, the youngest generation in the middle of growing up with this, how it's going to mark them.
Yeah.
All of them, I don't know.
And I think this is so important conversation because one of the things we talk about is how do we process what's happening internally. And so I'd love to ask you, Kevin, like, when or if or how did you give yourself, because I think so many people, and understandably, you got a job to do, you got family to take care of, it's like put your head down and go. Like, what was the point that you let yourself, if there was a point that you let yourself feel it, and were there any things you did that helped?
Yeah, I'd say, to preface it, I agree with a lot of what you both are saying, but I do want to say for everybody, I don't think there's any right and wrong way to deal with it. I think that what's unique, I think, even to us, is how we deal with this kind of topic and these type of feelings as men. I think that that's a uniqueness.
Yeah,
sure.
I think for me, my first reaction was not to solve problems, but to be strong. You know, my wife at the time was an ER nurse at a level 1 trauma center, and also is in the medical unit. I don't know all the military terms for it, but she's in the military, and basically her job or role in the military is to be deployed for crises such as these, for pandemic. That's what she's trained for. So she was deployed for a 30-day period in the middle of all this. We got 2 kids. We got just wild. I mean, it was I felt like I need to hold it all together. You know what I mean? And just present strength. You know what I'm saying? So when you walk into my house, I might be afraid. I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to hold it together. This is survival mode. And so that was what I did. I really started to recognize those feelings, those dark feelings, probably not for months after where I can identify it now. But like I said, I talked with my wife this morning. I was like, can I share some of our journey with some of these anxieties and depression type things that we've been dealing with? This has been the theme of our past couple months, is how can we achieve health? You know, how can we take an honest look inside at our feelings and emotional lives and go, all this has really affected us, and how can we how can we grow? You know, I don't want to just sit in this place of, I think we've all felt these feelings of despair and fear, and but I think she was the first one to get help. Being pregnant with all the hormonal things going on, she went on a really, she went on the first journey of, she was having panic attacks, anxiety attacks multiple times every day.
Wow.
To the point where it was, for me, terrifying to see.
Yeah.
You know, someone you love so much to go. You know, it's one of those moments where we had looked at each other and I said, we're going to pause everything right now, and we need to get some help.
Yeah.
You know? And so for her, she started going to counseling. Thank God she found a great counselor her first shot. It's been super helpful. And we've always, in our house, kind of been against medicine for mental health and for all those things. And we've gone different alternative routes. And it was to the point where she went to her family care doctor, and she said, I don't care what it is, I need some relief, and so she started medication. And again, I've asked her if I could share all this stuff. She's absolutely use what you can to help people. So she has experienced so much relief from this medication that she's finally able to get into the mental headspace in order to work on the deep things.
Awesome. That's great.
So that's been a huge blessing for me to see that process. I mean, she just has a joy about her now. That, and not everything's fixed, but I think that when you're able to look at your situation, your feelings, and to go, oh, this isn't going to be what I feel forever. There is hope. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that's been hugely beneficial for us. But for me as the husband, and for me as someone who I think likes to present strength in situations like that, once she was getting help, and I didn't have to be the strong one in the relationship anymore, I started feeling the despair. And I don't know if there was just space for it or what. Some of the darkest, I think, seasons in my life, just wanting to lay down all the time, not get out of bed, not just looking at myself and thinking horrible thoughts about myself. I mean, I'm just all the horrible things you could ever feel, to the point where I would kick and scream before I ever admitted that I was depressed. Like, I don't want to say that about myself or speak that over my life, but gosh, I've been depressed.
Yeah.
And so just in the past couple months, I'm in the beginning of my journey, but I'm starting to.
I think
implement some
one of
systems
the
to
things
help.
though that's really, really important, if we're going to have a conversation like this that's going to be helpful for people, that I think that maybe people need to hear, is I think one of the most important things that we have to do is we have to take personal responsibility for our health.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing I hear you saying that you guys have done. And I think it's so important, because I
And you
think
can see
what
the health
happened,
spilling off people
yeah,
when they do that.
but I think when we don't take responsibility, that's where I think it ends up leading to really bad things, in our lives. And so I think what we kind of just even talking ahead of time, hey, let's talk about anxiety. We didn't do a lot of preparing. We just sit down and we talk. But I think it's really important, as we've said, we all process anxiety, or not anxiety. We all process even just the environment, the situations, the things that create anxiety differently, whether it is panic attacks or just the way, I'm just trying to go back and say baseline, just the way this year has impacted us, whether you felt anxious all the time, not, whatever. I just think it's really, really important to self-awareness. We've talked about that in previous podcasts. Learning about yourself and learning how you need to process. Like for me, that's kind of what I've been like the most like trying to learn in the season, where it's like, that's why I love these conversations, because otherwise I'll put my head down and I'll go to work, and then like I'll see you in a couple years. Right? But the negative of that, if you don't go sit on a rock for 2 hours, I think it's great. I really do. Is that it just builds. It builds, and you become even more and more unhealthy. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think it's little bits and pieces. I think it's a little different. And so I think it's just real important.
And again, I just think why this is so powerful is, again, it can be very easy, depending on how you're wired or your personality, to feel like, oh, this is selfish for me to take the space to do this.
Right. Yeah.
But understanding the most important thing for us as individuals, but also for the people that we love and lead, is for us to be whole on the inside. And I think giving ourselves permission, A, to feel, B, to have the space, like for your wife to do that, and to have them give her the mental space to say what is going on inside, and then allowing ourselves, whatever it looks like, we're all different, to use the tools available. And it's important because there's generations past that you don't go to counseling.
Right.
You don't do that. Jesus is enough if you're in the church world.
Yeah. Right.
Or I'm going to be strong and real men don't. But
Yeah.
no, like, I think there comes a place in people's lives, especially when pain hits, that you have to choose freedom over pride.
Yeah.
You have to say, I need to talk to someone, and there could be a person that is a healthy spiritual counselor or therapist that can help.
Yep.
And then B, I love that we're in a day and age, by and large, and I'm speaking to faith communities, where medication is no longer taboo.
Yeah.
Like God gives medicine to doctors for stomachs and for chemical imbalances in the brain, and for everything in between. And wisdom is to say, what can I? We're complex beings.
Yeah.
And what is and this is a year where what we're suffering with is emotional, spiritual, social, environmental, mental, everything.
Political.
And everything is like, what are the different ways holistically that I can treat and make sure that I'm a healthy person, that I'm taking the time to look inside, that it's not selfish for me to look inside and to take space to actually care for what's going on inside of me.
Well, self-care is one of the
Self-care.
things you're talking about. And I think that what is interesting is that we're all very different. So self-care is one aspect, and I think how we need a process, because one of the things that I think is it's taking me a long time to figure out is that I have to think through. I don't feel like, I'm just not a big feeler. So for a lot of reasons that we could get into, but we're not going to get into.
Why is it
'cause
you
love
always
to stop.
cry when Taylor Swift comes on?
Well, it's just because I love Taylor Swift. Okay, but for the most part, I'm not a feeler. A lot of people that don't know your humor, they're like, does he
That was
really
the most
love
vulnerable
T
you've been
Swift?
all day.
Wow.
I love Taylor Swift.
I love Taylor Swift.
No, it just doesn't.
T-Swizzer.
Yeah.
I think he said T Swift.
He goes, look, I love T Swift. It's fine.
Yes, leave me alone. I just
shorts. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't even know where I was.
would've
That
been-
was
you-
so
you
good. I was going to go somewhere.
It would have
but
been great if
I-
you could have been the one. That's
Yes,
your favorite off the new album.
I don't know if I've heard the new album. Sorry,
I-
but I just think that we all process it different. You're gonna go sit on a rock and cry.
Okay,
You're gonna-
can we not make that my default?
You're
Hey,
gonna-
Tucker,
you're-
can we do like a social media post of just him on a rock?
Yes.
Just like an
What are you gonna?
illustration.
How would you? Okay. So for me, I need conversations like these.
Yeah.
One of the things I've realized, I'm an external processor. I don't even like to internally process myself. I don't want to do it by myself. I need to sit down. When I went and saw I went and sat with a counselor for about 1.5 or 2 years for a season. It was what helped me so much in it was just being able to talk through. So how did that make you like? Why did you think you felt that way? Why do you think you thought that way? I need to go there. So I'm just so in my head and I'm so analytical that I have to like force myself to think. I need to think, why? Well, don't you feel like that's a lot? Don't you feel like that's heavy? Well, how did that make you feel? How did that, I have to kind of go through that process to actually get down to, oh, this is pretty awful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For me. What about for you? What do you have to do? Because I got to think it.
Yeah.
You just feel it and then you just,
Oh man, I think
like, how are you
everything-
handling?
Everything comes to me as anger. I think I just get angry with myself. I get angry with other people. I just get angry. I think I think I have to first realize that I'm not angry. I'm sad.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So okay, so what
Yeah.
you're saying is identifying your emotions.
Yeah, I
That's hard
start,
to do, isn't it?
I mean, you guys probably remember me during I flipped tables, man, on staff when we were going through the pandemic, whatever somebody said, I was
yeah.
the contrarian. I said, that's the worst idea ever, prove it. In my worst, I am the authenticity police, you know what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
why we probably have these conversations and it's healthy in some scenarios, but you'll say something, I'm like, bull crap, like, tell me the truth. And you're like, what are you talking about? You just said this. And I, there's part of that can be helpful, but I will openly admit that, man, I first presents itself as anger, and I'm mean to people. I distance myself. I probably ruin friendships and relationships, and then I'll look back and go, I'm just upset, or
I think that's a really important thing to do. And I think I really, really struggle with this when I was kind of just trying to walk through a process with a counselor for a season, is I don't even think, for somebody who who's calling and even said make a living on communication and language, to not know how to identify my own feelings.
Yeah.
It was like, it's pretty eye-opening. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It's just, I don't like that. You know what I mean? It's just all in this one big category. I don't like that.
Well, there's
And
this-
for me, though, let me just say one of
Yeah.
the things that for me, one of the things that I just felt like has been helpful through this season, and this is why I think as a pastor, I got very concerned about our church and our people in this season as to what their foundation is and what is holding them up. I feel like one of the things that helps me is I am a strict rhythm person, a routine person. I don't like when things get out of routine, so I'm definitely not an Enneagram 7. But the benefit of that was reading the Bible. For me, that's a priority, to have a moment just to do that. Journaling. I feel like that's such a great outlet for me, is to journal. I actually feel like I end up expressing how I feel the best when I journal. There's something in that process that I don't think I even think, but it's like something forces me to God, and it tends to come out in why would this happen? And it does come. I think some of it comes out in anger at the situation. Why did this happen?
Can I double down on this? I think it'd be helpful. We're coming up on an hour. We're going to go long today. I
That's
think
fine.
we should.
I'm hungry. We'll go along.
And hopefully you find this conversation helpful. And
If not, it's good counseling for us.
it's good counseling
We're doing
for us.
well.
And just precursor, we should have said this up front, but we are not counselors.
Right.
We are not, and
Yeah.
we don't claim to be.
No.
We're navigating this. There's people that could probably help you more as far as therapy goes. And
Don't
we're
use
just
this
trying to process
conversation
this-
as your therapy.
Right. We're trying to process this out loud. Just where we are, but I do think it would be helpful to say what has helped you.
Yeah.
in this season? Like, what are some practices you've had that go, man, that when I was low, this really helped me? And maybe not just for you, because we only represent a couple types of people, but for the people around you. You know, when you think about your wife, when you think about your kids.
Yeah.
And same with you, Pastor Russ, and we'll just go around the table. What are some helpful things that have kept us afloat?
Okay. When I think back to the pandemic, I think one of the things for us is different for different seasons of life. We early on, in kind of as a family, I think there was something because I had living at home at the time. One's got married since then. 2 older daughters. They're not the young age. I mean, they're still one's in college, one's in high school. So we kind of. It was a unique season for us to be together where we're kind of all running different directions, as even my daughters are. They kind of really. So there was something about family and being together, which that's honestly, I remember like 3 weeks into this, really it hit me all of a sudden one day. It was just a real empathetical moment, kind of. It hit me as I thought about all the single people that are isolating by themselves, whether they're people on staff, or other people. I was like, oh gosh, that's gotta be hard, because at least we kind of like, what do you want to do today? I don't know what you want to do. I don't know what you want to do. But we're together, so we felt like it was kind of a special moment at first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I thought that was like, for us, again, my young kids, you might have been going, get me out of this, but for us, it was a little bit therapeutic to do that. For me, I think being in just, again, I know it just sounds cliche, but having a rhythm of a personal time with God in a place to journal out, I do feel like it was a funny little thing that I did. This was years ago when I was just really in a difficult season of struggle. I want to say, in many ways, I don't know if it was depressed or just I was overwhelmed by my emotions, and I had not really ever felt like that before because of the season. I would journal, I would write out my prayers, which kind of ended up being a lot more of me writing out how I felt in that day. And I remember I was trying to track that, and I would put a little emoji symbols at the top of the page.
That's funny.
Like, if I felt better that day, I was putting a smiley face. If I felt really bad, because it was literally that drastic from one day to the next. I'd feel good one day, the next day I wake up and I would feel like, this is awful. I'm never going to get out of it. This is the worst thing ever. You know what I mean? And so I started just doing that. I don't know why. It was after I started talking to a counselor, because I think the counselor was helping me identify emotions that I just never processed. I'm being such a heady person, I never processed them. So I feel like journaling helped me, but I guess what I'm saying is I feel like routine helps solidify a very rocky season. It was very unstable of a season, and I felt like that foundation spiritually helped me. I also feel like this is kind of a weird one, and it's just probably unique to me, but my role of having to preach into the season, again, I threw myself into that work mode, so that's something I'm just going to have to process and deal with, because I said everything comes later. When you're a leader and you're a boss, or you're in charge of an organization, you start immediately thinking about them and the people there. You don't think about yourself.
Yeah.
So I go immediately into that mode, and I think having to preach every week and feeling like people are struggling, so they need a voice of hope or clarity, or where's God in all this, I feel like that helped me as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm having to wrestle with those same questions from an authentic place and discover them in the Bible and God's Word as He speaks to me, and then be able to and give that to someone else. Every time I preach, I have to process.
Yeah.
I process before I preach. How does this impact me? How does this impact others? So for me, again, I don't know. I feel like those maybe don't connect a ton with a lot of people, but for me, I think it was personal times. And again, I don't know. I had older daughters. I feel like it was a lot of shock for a long time. It was like, okay, your sport was canceled, and you're not going to school anymore for the rest of this year, and it's online. They were doing well, and so it wasn't early on, but as I'm getting later into this, I find that I'm having to like we did a test with our staff, and just kind of to rate yourself when it comes to emotional stuff and different things, and it was like reading a line on there is like, people would say that I process grief well or often, and it's like, okay, I'm probably pretty low on that. What does it mean to process grief? Because I'm not sitting around crying about it, but we've definitely lost things. I've lost things. I think where it came out for me again, and then just you can go. I think where it came out for me is it came out as a leader. I think the leader side, it came out in deep frustration.
Yes.
I think that was probably, if you had asked me if I could nail it down, that was probably the emotion that I felt the most over the last 8 months is a deep frustration. Frustration at the moment, frustration with God, frustration with the church, frustration with our people, frustration with what's going on in the world. It was just a deep, deep frustration that at times would be anger, at other times, that's kind of how I process it. But
I
I
will
throw
say
myself to
that
work.
you are one of the most consistent people I know as far as, you have a rhythm and a routine. I admire that about you, and I think that is something that can help a lot of people. What about you, Russ? What's that thing that you look back and you go, yep, that helped. That will help somebody.
There were so many things. Some of this will sound cliche, but it was real for me. Rhythms and vision. Like, vision's huge for me. I think there's a verse that says where there's no vision, things die, people perish. Like, you just lose your way. And so for me, I had to redefine what that season, I had to reframe it.
Yeah.
The scoreboard's different.
I like that.
So
Yeah.
what is being faithful, to use kind of maybe lofty language, but what does it look like for me? Who do I want to become out of the season? The season's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've tried to do as I've got older is think in terms of futuristic looking back.
Yep.
A year from now, how will I wish I would have handled this season?
Yeah.
What will I wish I would have accomplished? And I did well in some of those areas, not well in others. But I think trying to write out vision, and then trying to say, okay, what rhythms will really, really help me? So same as you, routines were really, really huge for me. Part of those routines, one of the things I think sometimes this doesn't sound very spiritual or deep for some people, but exercise.
Yeah.
So two things with exercise. One, I fell in love with walks.
Yeah.
During my work days, work alone, work
Yeah.
from my apartment for 4 months,
Yeah.
I would set aside, like every couple hours, I would take a lap through my apartment complex. And I would make myself leave my phone behind. So I would just intentionally unplug the Wi-Fi
Yep.
of my soul a couple times a day
That's
to
good.
walk out and be in nature. And then I set aside a whole commitment of at-home workouts. I bought one of those hang-up bars.
Yeah.
For my spare
Pull-ups and-
bedroom, a kettlebell. I just bought a few things to put in my spare bedroom and created these like WODs, workouts of the day, that I would try to do five times a week because it's just scientifically proven.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we think, oh, I need to pray more. No, I may just need to get the serotonin
Yeah.
going, and
Yeah.
I may
I
just.
love it.
So I think that, and this, that has been proven to help with depression and emotions. So I think I really tried to not just have career vision, but personal vision. I tried to create new projects to work on. I've been working off and on trying to get a book done
Yeah.
for 5 years. So I spent hours on my days off working on writing. Being isolated, I try to take advantage, especially in those times. One of the benefits and blessings is what you take for granted.
Yeah.
So we started doing like every other night, like FaceTimes with my sister who lives in Colorado, my
Yeah.
parents who live in South Carolina. We would do family FaceTimes. That was really important. Obviously,
Yeah.
a rhythm as far as I had a devotional meeting with God. That was important for me. Journaling, equally important for me. And then this may be something longer for another one, but this whole concept, it sounds kind of this ancient, mysterious word called Sabbath.
Yeah.
That's been a game changer emotionally for me over the last 5 years, which dive deeper into it maybe some other time. But it goes back to this ancient group of people that were slaves, and they were pretty much forced workaholics
Yeah.
who had become human doings instead of human beings. And when God, through Moses, maybe even if you're not familiar with church, you've heard the story, brings them out, he tries to rehumanize them and recalibrate them.
Yeah.
And he tells
That's
them, and for me especially, I'd spent so many years of my life with the Wi-Fi of my life being high speed, high functioning, and that I didn't understand when I would glitch. And I believe in my faith journey and what I believe that God actually gave one of the greatest gifts to humankind is this command/invitation to unplug the Wi-Fi once a week and to remember that I'm not God.
Yeah.
And that I'm called to reflect and be a human being and not a human doing. So over the last 4 or 5 years, I've had a very imperfect journey. And that became even more important to me during this time, especially if I'm going to work even harder.
Yeah.
And to have a day a week where I unplug,
good.
I don't think about work, I don't do work. There's an emergency, obviously that's different, but that I take a week to reflect, to journal, to replenish my soul,
A day.
to read a
really
day
good.
a week.
Yeah.
Yes. And I even changed up some of what I read. Like I intentionally stopped reading on those days books that I would be tempted to apply.
Yeah.
I've never been a big
Leadership
fiction
books
book.
and all
yes,
that.
yes, I love leadership guru. Like not guru. I'm a leadership guru. No, I'm a leadership junkie.
Yes,
like I love
you
that
are.
stuff. But I started reading like old classic American fiction, like
Wow.
Fitzgerald, and on all those guys.
Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald.
So one of the things that I think is just interesting, your journey, like I felt like the beginning of this year that God was I felt like I don't know, God was inspiring me to kind of go on a similar type of journey. And then I feel like as soon as the pandemic happened, I just threw that all out the window.
Yeah.
Like I just really felt like it was like, it's important, like you're saying, to like, what are the moments and how you slow down and disconnect and do all those things.
The Sabbath.
And I was just, I was like, you guys know me at the beginning of the year. I was like, okay, this is a word
John
that
Mark
God's given
Comer,
me.
yeah.
I was like, I am going to stop striving. And then March, and it was just, I went straight into work mode. And I've got a Sabbath scheduled for July 13th, 2022. It's gonna be great. I cannot wait for it. No, I'm just kidding. But I have to it just helps me to be able to hear you. Like I feel like you encourage me, like to be able to hear you just talk about that, because I feel like that all went out the window. I was on this track, like, okay, and then I just gone.
You know, I love what you said about vision. I think that's so important, and about all the physical things you can do. I mean, I think that if you're starting to feel this type of way, you need to check: are you exercising?
Yeah.
Are you are you growing? I mean, maybe you're listening to this, you're not even a Christian, but are you focusing on your growth as a person?
Right.
Doing
Yeah.
any introspective work? I think it's one of the gifts of following Jesus, is that he cares about your heart
Right.
so much, not about the things you're doing. So you could have this huge commission check from work, but Jesus looks at your heart. What does it say? Is that God doesn't look at what man looks at. He looks
Yeah.
at your heart.
Yeah.
And so I think that, are you doing any introspective work? For me, I say yes to both of the things you guys said. But I would add my wife's, Andrea's biggest growth up, I think, moments were when she took the time and when we said yes to doing whatever it takes to or bring structure to her life in a way that might not be most beneficial financially. Maybe working these hours in the medical field
Right.
would get you a certain type, but going, you know what? We're going to invest in structure.
Yeah.
And I think that for us, we're kind of free spirits. We'll
Yeah.
chase the wind. I mean, that's kind of how we are, and we've lived so much of our life that way. But for us to go, no, let's invest our conversations and time, and let's sacrifice resources, which God's been so good. The way that so many people have lost jobs and we haven't, and it's been really good. But to say, you know what? All these things that used to matter, let's put those to the side, and let's create structure, and let's create limits, and for me, I'm somebody who I don't feel like I have any limits. And so
Yeah.
I'm really passionate about probably
Everything.
everything. So I think I'm
Yeah.
Chip Gaines, and I think I can remodel houses. I think, I think I can have
learned
12
something.
kids. I think I'm the Octomom. I think I can do all these things, but I can't. And to look at your life and go, what lanes have I been trying to run in
Right.
that God didn't build me to run in?
Yeah.
Right.
I wasn't supposed to run that race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't supposed to be that person. What dreams maybe should you put on hold so you can sit down and go, this is what matters. And I think, and I think another healthy thing for everybody, and we'll wrap up. I think that why I wanted to have this conversation with you guys, two men in my life who I respect deeply, is to go, you know what? If you are breathing, then you need to address your mental health in
Yeah.
this season. If you live on this planet
Yeah.
And if you have a phone, and if you have a job, and if you have relationships with people, you need to take a second to press pause for not just your own good, but for the good of the people around you.
Yeah, that's good.
You have to.
good.
There is not a percentage of people. You could be having your best earning year ever. Your 401k could be doing fantastic. You could have gotten married. You could have had a kid. You could, whatever. You need to address this in your life.
Yeah.
Because your relationships are depending on it. And
Yeah.
I think, too,
That's so
just
good. That's
one thing that maybe I think I've learned how important it is to invest in relationships.
Yeah.
And how in a season of isolation
Yeah.
for all of us, how we need community
Yeah.
more than ever.
Yeah.
And that if you are, this is why we love church. This is
Right.
why we love
Right.
Yeah.
the people we do life with.
Yeah.
You, even if you disagree with people, even if you hate the way they voted, you better learn how to love people, because
Yeah.
there will be things in this world that will do their very best to tear us apart.
Yeah.
And if
So
you want
good.
to thrive, and if you want to experience life and life to the full, then you better connect your life with people who are around you. If you're feeling these types of things, who have you told?
Yeah.
Have you told anybody who doesn't live in your home?
Yeah.
Have you been honest?
And just, I know we'll come to a close, but I want to share something. I know we don't get super spiritual at times on this, but I think this is important because of what these past 2 episodes have been. There's this story in the Bible. I don't know what the faith may be if you're listening, but where Jesus runs into this woman with a really checkered past. I think she was on maybe marriage 6 or 7 or something, and there's a lot of immorality in her life and a lot of dysfunction. And when he ran into her, he wanted to have a conversation about how she was really doing. I love what you talked about last week. Like, what does it look like when you ask them, like, how are you really doing?
Right.
And she started getting political and theological.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I got a question for you. You know, a lot of the people are saying that this is the right place to worship and this is who you should vote for. And I love the fact that Jesus, one of the things I love about Jesus is he saw through all of that.
Yeah.
And where she was obsessed with talking about what was going on in the outer world, he wanted to really laser through what's happening in your inner world. And I think the beautiful thing, the powerful thing about these conversations, especially right now, if you are so worried about whether Biden or Trump
Yeah.
is, who knows? Maybe we have a president right now, we don't know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're so worried about Biden and Trump, if you're so worried and so opinionated about everything happening politically, even theologically, I think probably our encouragement and challenge for ourselves and anyone that listens is, what if today at the well,
Yeah.
if you believe in Jesus, if you believe that you really were, maybe there's something bigger out there, that you really were created, designed for a purpose. What if the biggest conversation for you in this season isn't what's happening in the external world, but what's happening in your internal world? And can you give yourself permission to let the facades down and not change the topic,
Yep.
but to actually allow yourself and maybe even reach out, God, if you're out there, would you take me by the hand into the inner recesses of what's really happening inside of me so that healing can happen?
I love that.
That's so good. We
You
should
have
just
any-
end right there.
we should.
That's so good. I just like that should be the title of this, permission to feel. You know what I mean? Like it's just like I think that's great. I think that's, you guys all said it. What you guys said was so great, and I'm grateful to have friends like you guys in a season like this. And I feel like these kind of conversations are, whether they're sexy topics or not sexy topics, I think they're really, really critical to have. And if it's not for anybody that's watching live or listening to this some other time, for us.
Yeah, I'm thankful for you
us.
too.
I'm just thankful to be able to sit at a table and to be able to process it, and it challenges me to go, because I'm an external processor and I'm an external world person.
Yeah.
Like when you were talking earlier about all this stuff, that you're like, who I'm becoming out of this. I'm thinking, what are we building out of this? You're thinking, who am I becoming out of this? And I'm like deeply challenged. I was like, oh crap. I'm not thinking about who I'm becoming. I'm thinking about what I'm trying to build. Like, so I just appreciate you guys. The perspective that you guys bring challenges me every day. And I feel like that's what we need. That's what this podcast was meant to be. We want to challenge you to think. We want to challenge you. And so today, we want to challenge you to think feelings.
Yeah.
We want to challenge you to think about this season, what you've been going through, what the people around you have been going through. What does it look like for you to identify emotions? That's not easy to do, but you got to go through that process and understand, identify emotions, and don't be afraid to talk to someone.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to end this.
Reach
Don't be
out.
afraid. Reach out and talk to someone. If you're feeling depressed, anxious, you're having panic attacks,
Yeah.
any of those things, anxiety, if your kids are having anxiety, do what you did. Take personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Take personal responsibility. And if you're a parent, take responsibility for your kids. Don't just, oh, you're going to be okay. No, you need to have conversations. You got to deal with this, because if not, we're going to be dealing with a whole different pandemic.
Yeah.
1 year, 2 year, and 5 years from now, and with the younger generation. So it's been a great conversation, guys.
I love you guys.
I love you guys.
Hey, if you're listening, we got resources to help you. Send us an email, podcast@thex.church. We got counselor lists wherever you live. We'd love to steer you in the right direction. Your life's worth it. Your future is worth it. God has something in store for you. So I love you guys.
Love you too, man.
See you later.
See you.